Hello, listeners. Welcome to a new edition of Understand the Science of You, where we're bringing a guest back. Todd Mad Dog Matzkin-Bridger is joining us because, yeah, right, by popular demand, but not only was it a lot of fun for us, but, those that were a part of those times definitely, appreciated it. And, even some behind the scenes gave me some messages, some of the old, you know, some of the old guys running the place, so to speak, appreciating, the conversation as well as the zingers. They definitely, made sure to point out the zingers. And so, the reason why I wanted to bring Todd back is, I guess I'll be more transparent at the very end of our conversation, about why it was important to have, for Todd to do both interviews and to do the second one. But to kick this off, what I'll say was, so this is kind of on you, Todd, because you had said to me, well, it doesn't really seem like too much is that different, whatever else. And so, I was like, all right, challenge accepted, no problem. We'll just do one, where you kind of we're this way, just kind of dipping our toe in the pond as you will, right? Which is how a lot it is with a lot of people, right? You do some changes, so you dip your toe, and then I was like, all right, let me open up that fire hose a little bit, and then we're just going to see how that goes, right? And then just to also show, my buddy Z, who I know that you probably aren't listening, and that breaks my heart, but we'll deal with that, at another time. I took off my glasses because I don't have to worry about trying to read or see things so much. So I'm going to see how it goes. I literally, Todd, can't see you for beans. I mean, it's kind of like almost like a, I don't know, almost like a white thumb with some felt on top is kind of like what I see. So, in case
describing you think. Exactly the description.
Oh, that's hilarious. So anyway, so we're gonna see if I can, try to do this. I also want people to think, I'm not like, trying. It's definitely not a fashion thing. I would very much be appreciative of being able to, have 20/20 vision and see things without getting headaches or, needing glasses and things. So, but anyway, I do want to at least, try to, but I also want to give the impression I'm willing to be personable, so to speak, right? Like if I could see and have everybody see me, that's a win for all. But I got to kind of look out for me, since I got to read stuff and drive the train. But since you're going to drive this time, I don't have to worry about that. So I thought I'd, try to, compromise, meet in the middle, let people know, I listen and things like that. And anyway, so that being said, I really don't know how this conversation is going to go, but I did think it would be good though to get a good contrast, right? Of kind of a, a before and after, right? Like, okay, some maybe introducing some what one would perceive as some changes about self, and then some more what one might perceive as some more drastic changes about self, and seeing how one reacts. And so, So anyway, so that being said, that's why I really appreciate you again taking the time to come back and say, okay, all right, I'll play round two, especially after, literally after you and I finished up the first one, I sent you the squirrel consciousness one just to poke the bear to let you know that you missed it. So, anyway, that being said, let me just pause for the cause here, and Todd, kind of either let you jump in and intro anything you want or have to say, or start asking questions, whatever you wish,
like,
sir.
Since now you have the glasses off and you can't see, I should have had like signs that are like popped up. You wouldn't be able to read it, but it'd be like,
and I'd be like, thanks for making me look 80 to everybody, Todd. I appreciate it. Right? Or that I can't see, I shouldn't say that anything about an age.
I got the glasses now too that I need for watching TV and movies and things like that. I feel the pain actually. It's cool too. I had a chance to listen to a few more podcasts, and I think the last one that you did too, and it was there's definitely a different Graham Skidmore, Skiddy as I call you, than probably what I was used to. Your life probably runs a bit different than what I remember, being a part of. So, but man, it's a transformation. It's there is some things that are definitely 180s, but then there's still those things I'm like, okay, yeah, I kind of saw that in Skiddy back then, years ago. But you were doing a lot of like self reflection and looking back at the times and like your podcast, you were talking a little bit about how things can't get better, and you were talking a little bit about, hey, if things can't get better, then shoot, that kind of sucks. You plateaued, you've hit the high point. It's all downhill from there, which was extremely motivational for me. So I appreciated that. But what I was wondering is, when you look back and you're evaluating yourself, Graham, are you looking back and are you looking at one moment? Are you like, I mean, we all have those times that are great. We all have those times that suck. Like, are you looking at one specific moment? Are you looking like over months or years? Like, how are you making that evaluation, whether things are good or things aren't good?
It's funny you say that, it's a great question. And obviously, right, not learning how to navigate is a theme, right? I'm trying to help everybody with. I'm trying to think of how to answer this question. I would say is, I don't worry. So this would be what I would use to try to use spiritual terminology that somebody would be more familiar with, is to say what you're talking about is kind of when I went from things happening to me to things happening for me. Right. And that's a very broad, but it's that going like, okay, instead of getting kicked in the teeth, it's actually like bumper bowling, telling me, no, you're not supposed to be going down this path. Right. And so, or likewise, right, when you are going down the path that you're supposed to be going down, then the synchronicities, that continue to support you, right, happen. Now, admittedly, throughout most of my journey of learning, a lot of it had to do, look, you've known me for a while. My learning style is not for the faint of heart. That did not change, believe me, over the going through this. And so there was some people will talk about like a beautiful surrender or, something like that. And that might be cool with them. For me, I joke. I mean, it was felt a lot more like, beaten into submission until I gave in. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Because like I had to try it my own ways. I had to figure it out. I had to try to outthink things. Right. But that's how I have to learn to figure out my own working knowledge. Right. So it's one thing to know it. It's another thing to be able to live it and be. And I'll be the first to tell you, that doesn't mean that I understand it all the time, like why things are happening the way they are. Right. Like you said, a lot of it's just hindsight. Right. But what I did start doing, even like before I started kind of going through this transformation, is for whatever reason, I just started keeping track of, at the time I just called it, God time versus Graham time, right? And I was trying to figure out, like, when things happen the way I wanted them to, how did they turn out versus, when they happen on, on his time frame. And I haven't won yet. Right. And so that's how I add some objectivity into it, right? As I do look at those things, right? And I recognize that, and because a lot of times, right, it's like, okay, you learn in hindsight, but then you got to apply it in moving forward.
Yeah.
And so now, depending on if it's good or not, I guess it's just kind of like, right now, like I'm just focused on just trying to be peaceful and present at the day, right? That's not something that's normal for me. It's not something that comes easy, right? And that's just something that I'm kind of working on at this specific time. But gosh, it's funny. I appreciate this moment of reflection. I'm doing it out loud. So I guess a lot of it just has to do with if I see the I'm going to go back to Jumi's thing, and she talked about how so much of the positive synchronicities, and that's what I would say, right? Is that I spent so much time in the transformation feeling like, I don't know, I'll call it the Charlie Brown with the football, right? Where and Lucy going to kick it, man. I can't tell you, man, I was Charlie Brown like nobody's business, man. I was the definition of perseverance, right? But boy, was I going to keep learning the hard way with that football, keep getting pulled out from underneath me, no matter how many times I set it up, right? And so it took a long, so I'm done. And I should also clarify that, to your point, thank you, by the way, thank you very much for noticing how different some of these things are. I had the luxury of being isolated by myself. Some of it was via injury, so it wasn't totally via my pleasure. The universe, said I needed to kick up to self-work, and I was sidelined. But needless to say, I literally think about too, like if you spent 80 hours a week by yourself in a house doing self-work and reflection, right? Like you'd start to understand yourself pretty well too. You know what I mean? Especially using, with different tools and coaches and guides to helping you along the way. And so that was a lot of it. And so it took quite a few years till I started to kind of be good with things. And I would tell you that whole, like, trying to be at peace and saying, okay, I'm good with how things are happening. I always understand it. believe me, when I tell you that's a newer transformation, that's like a newer transformation in the terms of like weeks.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, not months, or you know what I mean? So I don't want to give the wrong impression. I'm still working that one through.
So if you like, are there things that you go back to and you say, gosh, things things can't be better? Like, are there moments in your life or a certain time period where you thought to yourself, gosh, things can't get better than this? And if so, what was it? Like, what were those one or two of those times where you really thought that?
Man, why you always got to ask me these embarrassing questions? And unfortunately, I can't see that. I'm just assuming this is the devilish grin of yours that I can't see that I'm receiving right now. Um, yeah, you know, I'm laughing because all of the ones where I felt like that were all like so totally based on, um, you know, a very materialistic or shallow mindset understanding of
Yeah.
self, right? Like achieving of milestones. Like I remember, and I'll never forget this. If you know, if Chris did, if this ever gets back to Chris, you know, Chris Stanley back in the days in Quicken Loans, I'll never
Oh,
forget. Yeah, I know you remember. Great.
I sure do.
Yeah, so we were out. I was promoted to the sales director, and we were out at the bar partying and whatever, and and for some reason I had it in my mind that like that was somehow like making it, right. Like I don't know, I like just had this, you know, even though the guys that were like, look, I don't think you really understand. We don't make as much as you think we make, and it's like about building. I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. You're just like trying to make sure I'm in, right? Right. No, they were being honest, right? But needless to say, at that time, I was like, I kept saying something like, "Oh, look at the $1 million ass, baby, $1 million ass," and I'm drunk, right? I'm obnoxious, and Stanley's like, "Dude, if you say that shit one more time, I'm gonna punch you." I was like, and so I was like, "All right." Well, at least thanks somebody for letting me know how obnoxious I was. So shut up. But yeah. So that's like one moment, right? Where I thought that, I was,
Yeah.
on top of the world and definitely was not. Um, gosh.
Also, for context,
Yeah.
you were like in your 20s. I mean, like you were pretty young then.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. What I was achieving at a young age
Yeah.
was impressive, right? I guess, and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Yes, thank you. But yeah, I definitely did not have a problem getting confidence in myself over that one.
What's funny is
And then, yeah.
I can still hear the joy and the excitement. Like it's still a great moment. Obviously you look
Oh,
back at it a little
like,
different, but it's still great.
oh, to your point, look, I mean, there's definitely, moment to your point, right? We remember a lot of moments, right? We remember how we feel. And that was like one of those things where there was like one promotion that happened every like 2 or 3 years, right? And there were definitely
Yeah.
guys that were there a little bit longer than me and otherwise, right? And so I knew if this wasn't it, then could potentially be another 2 or 3 years before something else. And anyway, so yeah, I worked really hard. And then I made that, and then, I made that achievement such a part of my identity, being such, even for, I think, for 10 or 15 years, I was like the youngest sales director, and then I think until Dion Dwyer came along. And
That's
then,
right.
yeah, and then Dion took that crown, but I held on to it, but yeah, so, but yeah, a lot of my stuff that was essentially all tied to money related matters or some sort of status or pride, something like that. So, if you want me to really reveal some other stories, yes, I have no problem embarrassing myself for the betterment of all, if that's what we're doing here. But yeah, there was a tremendous amount of humble pie that was eaten along this self-reflection. That's for sure.
Yeah, but you know what? I mean, at the time though, I mean, how great did it feel though? I mean, wasn't it awesome? It's obviously retrospect. You look back at anything from 20 years ago, 25 years ago, you're going to be, yeah, you might think of it different now. Um,
Oh, are
but
you kidding me, man? Look, oh, for
it was
context,
awesome.
I went from saying I'm just trying to get a job that doesn't pay me in terms of hourly wage, like, and because
Yeah,
in my mind, not going to college, during that was like how I separated the difference between like trying to get like into a corporate job, right? Was just like,
right.
oh, I mean, a corporate job meant like salary, and non-corporate job was like hourly. I don't know, like I was like 20 years old, right? That's what did I know, And then ended up getting paid out, ended up getting a corporate job paid hourly. So how was that for some irony, right? But I was like happy to get hired, right? Like I barely got out of high school, right? And all of a sudden, you know, in a matter of my first, you know, and I tied for, you know, #1 sales guy with Berkmeyer, you know, and then stayed in the top 3 for a few years. So I was fortunate at income at 21, 22, 23, right? I was, you know, making, you know, I guess in hindsight, I didn't realize how abnormal it was, right? What I was making at that young age. So, but yeah, so I definitely don't blame. It was a huge amount. There was a tremendous amount of, there's a tremendous amount of pride in both my personal accomplishments. There was a tremendous amount of pride in building and creating something, right? What we all were talked about quickly. That was a big thing for a lot of us, right? That was part of the draw, was that it was more than just kind of going to work in a job. Now, you know, at different times it came that way, and right. But like, that was definitely, you know, something that was something that mattered. I can remember, you know, saying back, I remember back in the Scoundrel days saying they're going to write a book about this place someday. And, you know, and my goal is just to make it, you know, enough of a dent so that I get, you know, of a contribution so that I get mentioned or something like that. Right. Like that was kind of like my way of trying to, I don't know, limited way of understanding goals or achievements or otherwise. Yeah. But
I've used that line
there was a tremendous amount of pride.
Yeah. I want to be in a chapter, or, you know, or a blurb somewhere, you know. It's funny now that you get further removed from it, you're like, well, I ain't going to be in that book anymore. You know, it's like, they make that book, I'm not in it. So, you know what, too, I wonder if you look at things like this, like, hey, you say, hey, things can't get better than this. And usually you're probably saying that during a time where you think things are going great, right? A moment, a time period. But I don't know about you, but I oftentimes, when things are not going the way I want them to go, which is more often, happens to be more often than, hey, I think things are just peachy keen and awesome. And I say, to try to make myself feel better, Graham, I go and I say, things could always be worse. And it's true. Like, just like you said, hey, things can always be better. You can always get better. Things can always be worse. What is there a danger? You feel like there's a danger in thinking that way? And do you ever think that way? Like, oh God, things really suck. They could even suck worse, you know? Like, I sometimes think, well, I could lose fingers. That would be worse than where I'm at right now, or lose a limb, or, you know, all of a sudden I'm on the streets. Like, I always think of like the worst case like scenario, something absolutely horrendous that could happen. I'm like, okay, well, I'm in a pretty good spot then right now.
Yeah, you know, that's such a good. So that's one of those, like everything, right? Or there's a duality or multi-dimensional learnings to all kinds of things, and this is a great example of another one of them. The you know, initial, I'd call it at its root core, which is, hey, be content for what you have, be at peace, right? Don't look over, you know, and just be present, right? Like, yeah, that's good sound teaching, you know, like, but that's like a foundation to kind of get started, right? But then when all of a sudden it gets used to make somebody marginalized, because they're like, oh no, you're just on this spiritual path because, you know, you're just not appreciative enough. So let me just keep giving you shit sandwiches to eat and taking from you and oppressing you and things like that nature. In the meantime, congratulations, you're doing a great job, you know, on the spiritual path, right? Like, that's the one that drives me back. That's the one that drives me bonkers, that I'm gonna, you know what I mean, that I'm definitely going to become more outspoken against, because that's the stuff that's not cool, right? And that's what I'm trying to help people to recognize when that's happening, you know, when they're in that situation, right? And then the other part of that, though, and this is also where it is, and this is what somebody has to figure. I think everyone's got to figure this out for themselves. Of between, and I'll tell you where I ended up with this, because I used to get pissed off from people, and I still get frustrated when people would say to me, well, you know, you could have, you know, have this happen or that happen to you or whatever else, right? And I said, yeah, you know what? And I could have also been an amazing human being for a gazillion incarnations, and have also, you know, done enough good stuff to warrant a pretty wonderful life as well. Why is it that I need to lower my expectations to match the shit that I'm in to make myself feel better, as opposed to saying like, okay, this ain't as good as it gets, right? Like, how the heck do I pull myself out of here, right? And so, and then saying, no, while I am appreciative of what I had, right? Like, and I'm content. Like, yeah, things could always be worse. I acknowledge that, right? I don't want to take what I have for granted, which I believe me, I've been so guilty of that. That's absolutely a pot calling the kettle black. That was the absolute downside to young success in life, is I learned very little value and appreciation for much. But then, and instead of it going and saying, okay, things that suck worse, is going, yeah, but these are the standards that I have for myself. And these are the standards that I have for my life. And if those standards are not occurring, then something's got to change.
Yeah.
Right? Because I believe that I'm worthy of that. And it doesn't mean that I'm entitled to that without doing the work, right? But it means that I'm worthy of that. And if I do what I'm supposed to do, whatever that means, right, then I should feel comfortable without guilt, without shame, without having to feel materialistic, whatever, right? For then, stepping into that.
And before I get into some of the other things, it's so funny as I'm looking at your screen and watching you talk, I keep thinking of like The Bachelor, or like, because like you're in this dark room, you got kind of like this black hoodie on, the walls are kind of funky, and you got some cool art on the wall, and like you're talking, like I feel like you're talking about like the date you just had or something like that. It's like, it's crazy. Like if we could AI this and like have you be like The Bachelor or something. It's like Gotham back there. I don't know, like Gotham City. Why is it dark in that room? Do you have a light on?
Yeah, man, it's purple. The walls are purple. I mean, what
I
color?
know, but it's a darkness there. It's like I don't know, maybe with your glasses off you can't tell. You can't see the light. I don't know.
No, man, there's definitely there's a very different understanding of reality right now without the glasses.
When you're going through this journey, like, I don't know if I really understand what started it and how difficult this journey really is. And I probably should have asked that last time, but I don't know, got all wrapped up reminiscing and stuff. So I'm like, I wanted to ask you that. And, was there like like just an epiphany or something completely happened that caused this, or did it happen over time? And then just how difficult was it?
All right. Well, so many things get weaponized that here I'll bring this. This is my way of pushing back on the weaponization of things that shouldn't be weaponized. Which is, so to your point, yeah, there was absolutely a point. So Jen Romanowski Sunshine, she was the first guest. She also, I don't know if you recall her from the Quicken Loans time, or if you guys just passed crossed. Oh, good. Awesome. Yeah. Yep. And so somehow, her and I crossed paths a few years after I left, and she started to plant the bug about, hey, there may be more to you than what you understand about yourself. And I'm kind of getting poked to start poking you to start exploring yourself differently. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And then she's like, yeah, like you got like some, like psychism skills. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You're like crazy. Typical, you're nuts. And then she was like, hey, look, I'm also, being pushed to encourage, to tell you to start stepping into this, right? Which for me at that time, stepping into that meant like going on a mushroom journey, and which is not like something I really have, is not like my thing, right? Like, I'm not against people doing anything like that, right? It just was like just recreational drugs weren't typically much of my jam, right? Like I was a boozer, I guess, right? So I'm not saying, right, like believe me, there's no glass houses here, right? Believe me, I was, I had my vices. And so when we were talking about that, I felt like all that I knew was that there was something really big behind the door. Right. And so it took me 6 months between the time of her starting to have this conversation with me and me deciding to actually go on a journey. And so, yeah, so inherently I knew that there was something very heavy behind it. And I just knew that until I was ready to accept whatever that responsibility was, not to open the door. And that was where I was at. Right. And so it took me 6 months to be willing to accept that responsibility. And that came because I had a horrible time, horrible time in years following trying, I remember I understood the world one way, right? So all of my idiosyncrasies, ways of reading, understanding people, quirks, it all grew up around me, right?
Right.
I always had a support system. So all of a sudden, when that support system and people that knew me could translate me, like it was gone, man, I had horrible business meetings. I guarantee got people think this guy's a whack job, get him on some meds. Like, I mean, take your pick. Like it was, I really, really struggled. I went through a lot of embarrassing situations. I really struggled to find somebody who was just willing to listen and help me. I had plenty of people that were willing to tell me what to do, right? But I needed somebody to listen to me, right? And help me to get something just didn't like, right? I just couldn't get my feet underneath me. And I needed that before I could take in anyone else's information. And so one day I remember I was so frustrated and disheartened and like saddened by so much. I just broke down crying in my living room and just begged for, just help me to bring some happy into the world. What is going on around this place? Like, this was, I don't know, 3 years ago, I think ish. And I just felt this little ping in my head. And then I don't know, I guess maybe stuff kind of started to unravel from there or whatever, And so once I opened up that door and started to understand, people say, hey, what am I, what kind of deal, what's my purpose? What am I here for? Well, I went down that path.
Yeah.
That was what was behind that door. And so, there's been a tremendous amount that's been there and that I've been, taken in and I'm just now starting to unpack and unroll and unveil and things. And hopefully one of the undertones or the themes that people are also picking up on is my desire to get people to, create some peace and unity through understanding, right?
Yeah.
And respecting individuality, not through, conformity and fear and control, right? Let's not confuse that for,
Okay. So you have changed. Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Well, hey, look, a lot of cases, look, we were all products of our environment. I don't mean that in like the rock financial Quicken Loan stuff, but I mean like growing up, right? Like I grew up in a negative reinforcement, situation. I definitely carried that forward into everything else that I did. And it took me and it was very hard to unwire all that stuff. I mean, it was so hard to unwire all kinds of stuff. That's why I literally it was like hiding in a cave for, a hermit for a few years to be able to just isolate and to do these things. Now I had the luxury of being able to do that because I also dedicated, 21 years of my life to a career and didn't do anything. Right. And so I afforded myself the ability to be able to do that. But anyway, yeah, that was, I mean, yeah, I can go down all kinds of rabbit holes about the difficult stuff there. So I'll just pause.
And I know you mentioned Jen as a support staff, which is awesome. Yeah. Was there any other people along this journey that you felt like, there was a great support to you? And if so, how so?
Yeah, interestingly enough, those are the people that I've had as my guests, generally speaking. In one way or another, even like Jumi, she was a help, and she's like, wait a second, I barely knew you. You met you like out of this podcast that I was there. How? Well, because the podcast that she invited me to do with her pushed me through some, gates that I had to get through that, that unlocked growth and things like that. Right. And so those were important things. So Sunshine was absolutely important. Ruby, who did a podcast with, was an important one. Johnny has been very important. I just joke, I say, help me to understand how to use this human suit. Like I've never understood how to use this thing. Right. Like I got by, but like, clumsy. And so now, as I learn how to, like, as part of my rewiring of just thinking, also rewiring the body, right, and like getting that to read and understand and work correctly, right. And so it was pretty crazy to like watch my coordination improve and other things too that I wouldn't have thought of, right, that were more physical items. Gosh, I don't know. I started going down a crazy rabbit hole when you asked about things have been.
No, what you're saying is the people that help support you.
Oh, the other. Oh, yeah, that's right. So Johnny was very helpful. Jamie obviously was extremely helpful. In this, Sophia was extremely helpful. Sophia's the dog. She's.
Hey,
taught me much, you know.
I get it.
She taught me that she's the one who taught me the power of positive reinforcement.
Yep,
She's the
I
one who
can see.
broke that cycle for me. Was because she's just as stubborn as me, but as a dog, and it was like, you think I'm going to do something because you're, but you want to give me a treat? Okay, no problem. I'll do whatever you want, right? Like she
Yeah,
goes crazy, like Scooby Doo for a Scooby snack, right? And so, you know, and then I all of a sudden started just even myself and recognizing how much better I did when I was, you know, positive reinforcement myself and others. And you know, look, I think there's, and even the ability to in different people at different times. Right? I reached out to you at one point in time as I was untangling and understanding myself, right, and complimented yourself and Rachel on the relationship you guys had, right, and how I learned stuff from you guys as a result of that, right, and trying to get there. And have that, and having that, when I say there, that what I valued, right, just so everyone's clear, was I really valued the respect, the trust, the friendship, the fun, the realness that you guys had, right? Like it wasn't like it wasn't like you tried to make everything sound like it was roses and kisses, but and nothing ever happened. But it was also very clear that you didn't want it any other way than doing it together. You know what I mean? Yeah. And you guys had your fun that you would, you know, things that you would do, and you also had your things that you would do apart, right? And I just thought that, you know, I had never, and to me that, you know, I thought I had seen from what my exposure to different relationships, that was a very, you know, I thought a very healthy relationship, and something that I desired to have, right? Because I had never had that. I had females that were friends, and I had, you know, female relationships, so it really didn't necessarily have like the friend in the relationship. You know what I mean? There's obviously overlap but not to the extent like you guys had, right? And that was me. I just wasn't willing to let somebody in like that. I learned from everyone. I learned from all kinds of stuff all the time as I'm going. And a lot of times in spite of myself. Yeah, as a result of others and in spite of myself.
No, it's great to have a support staff, you know, along the way, and you know, certainly with people with different backgrounds. I was curious, like I know you were a golfer. Did you golf? Like, was it a stress relief? That, like, was that something that you did during this time? Like, was there, other than people or pets, was there something else that you did that gave you satisfaction, enjoyment?
Oh boy. Yeah, you know, it's interesting. The things that I used to do for quote unquote fun were really vices to let off steam, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, people would think that I belong to you know, most people go to a country club because they're looking for camaraderie, social, whatever else, right? No, I went for privacy. Right, to be, so that I could be left alone, and that it was one, and because it was a private country club, instead of where I had to change myself to be around the rest of the world, it was a place that revolved around me as a member, right? And so between the privacy and that, it was like that was like therapeutic for me to have a place to hide away, to go to do that, right? And then same thing with the gambling, right? People would think like, well, no, for gambling for me it was for the two things it represented was, one, it was to be able to, and by the way, I'm not saying this stuff is healthy, all right, especially for anybody listening. There's way cheaper therapy than gambling therapy. Let me assure you. But I was always under so much pressure that it was the only time I could finally just go, I just don't fucking care what happens. And to be able to finally exhale like that, in combination with, because I gambled and it was in the high roller room, I could have it also then revolved around me. So I could have my privacy. I could just be me. I didn't have to try to put on any mask to pretend anywhere. You know, if I was just which typically meant being, you know, in hindsight, an Ab's probably a shit-faced slob gambler that, you know, I know there were definitely a few times where I definitely remember a few of the guys saying, Skiddy, if it was anybody but you, we'd be throwing him out of here.
Well, hey,
so
yeah, when you took me, and you know, we didn't go in the high roller, so you had to, you know, kind of suck it up with the commoners. So, you know, I
oh no, this was
that
was when I was married, right?
Yeah,
that was when I was married. So that was when you know, gambling was more of just some fun to do on the side versus it becoming an actual like therapy or vice for me when I was on my own and divorce and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, things took a very, very different turn. Let's just, right. And that's also again, also why, yeah. But anyway, yes, that was, yes. Anyway, where were you going with that there before, as you were trying to give me the zinger?
No, it just came to me. Just came to me. You brought up a term inside of your last podcast. You brought up a lot, and it was really interesting and just ironic because we literally at work we just had a training on it the other day, and hadn't heard the term before, but knew a lot of the groups that fit into this, and it was neurodivergent. And yeah, and you brought up and hey, look, you're a super smart guy, and you're gifted, and you even brought that up, but gifted falls into that realm of neurodivergent. And I think one of the things that's really difficult, and I was thinking, well, gosh, I worked with you for 20 years. I never knew you were neurodivergent. You didn't either, and there's not a look, for most people that are neurodivergent, that you don't look any different. There's not something.
No, I mean, our mannerisms or other things like that but it's not like, we have like a third eye in the middle of our head or something. That's like that's a bit of a telltale. Yeah.
Exactly. Which makes it difficult to be like diagnosed and difficult for someone else to know. So like, I mean, when I was actually literally thinking of you in that meeting, and I was like, oh my God. I'm like, for 20 years, I thought the guy was an asshole. He's just neurodivergent. You know what I'm saying? Like
that's that's a very common answer, by the way.
And I'm like, what's the difference? What's the difference? And how do you know when someone is just a mean person and someone's neurodivergent? What's the difference? I don't know. That's what I wanted to ask you.
Oh, well, so for, yeah. And by the way, before anybody jumps on me, let me, I also, anything that I say regarding neurodivergent and me and correlating that with various other gifts, that's my personal perspective and my specific thing. There are plenty in the neurodivergent community that will disagree with my stance on things being gifts and otherwise. So I just want to, what I mean? That's just like my, in fairness and respecting all people's.
We don't want you to get canceled before you get started, Graham.
Yeah. Oh no, I am absolutely going to be kicking the tires to get canceled. Don't get me wrong. Oh yeah, we're just getting started, buddy. But yeah, but that's not the group of people that I want to. But that's not who I want to get canceled by. Yeah. Right. Those regardless of what it is, that's a marginalized group of people that that's just a great group of people. I don't know. Anyway, they're just very misunderstood. So how do you recognize the difference? That's a very, very challenging thing. Another thing, like, being confused with a narcissist is another one, right?
Yeah.
That's also, there's a lot of similarity there. I think Jamie is probably better to answer that, how to tell the difference from the other party's perspective than what I am. But what I would think to look at would be trying to understand the intent and looking beneath the actions and the tone to understand what's really trying to be achieved and the why behind it. Because a lot of it's the why, right? Because even though I was mean, even let's say I would have been mean or direct, or that, if you ever peeled it back, there was typically a thoughtful reason behind me doing whatever I was doing, right?
Very true.
And it was very rarely a selfish reason.
Very true.
Right. I'm sure sometimes there was, right. But typically that would, but if in the case of the narcissist, you're going to see that, that split more focused on what's in it for them and how it affects them. And, it's going to be a very individualized motivation. As opposed to like the greater good for the highest good of all. And then too, that's where you also have to watch people's actions, right? Because people will tell you who they are, right? They'll
So if
say,
you're
they can say a lot of things, but yeah. Go ahead.
so if you're working with someone that's neurodivergent, or you have a friend that you think is neurodivergent, what's the best way to get through to them?
Well, by the way, here's the other funny thing about neurodivergent is there's so many people that fall underneath having the quote unquote characteristics of neurodivergent, but I don't identify with the label because of how it's been weaponized, right?
Yeah,
However, like I think it's like 3 or 4 of the sharks in the Shark Tank, all identify as either having dyslexia or being dyslexic, however they say
right.
it for themselves, right? But they won't say neurodivergent, right? And so there's a lot of stuff like that. There are other people that, those that are in the, community, so to speak, recognize, you recognize yourself in others. But they're like, look, I don't associate me with what that unproductive stereotype is that's out there. Right.
Mm.
And so that creates a real problem then, because then the spectrum of people represented is only a partial spectrum. It's and it gets weaponized to be an unproductive spectrum. And then the other part of the problem is that there's the lack of representation of seeing yourself and seeing yourself achieve things and be things, being different, right?
Yeah.
And it's like how do you know that you're capable of doing something, that you can be something, if you don't see somebody like you doing it, right? And that's something that, like, I'm going to admit, as most of my life being a fairly, just, I guess, privileged just by being a white guy, right? By being a total foreign concept to me, right?
Yeah.
Understand that representation thing. It was only after I started to not fit into the world anymore, right? And I'm trying to look for answers and trying to figure stuff out. And, as I share with you how I learned through others, I'm trying to figure out, like, who do I learn from? And
Yeah, like how do you get through to someone that that maybe has some of those characteristics, whether they classify themselves as
yeah,
neurodivergent or
yeah. So
or
when you say,
not?
when you said that, yeah, what do you mean by, like, get through me? Like, how do we make a connection, or create the bridge to get past the misunderstandings of how, when you say it this way and when I say it this way, they actually mean different things?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's two ways to look at it. One, I think, is, I think about it inside the workforce, and I say, okay, there's neurodivergent people, or people have those characteristics that are inside the workforce, Graham, and you know, it's got to be, and from what you talked about, it's got to be more difficult for those people to get into the workforce. When you're talking to someone like that, or a work associate, like, how do you how do you get the most, keep them happy, you know understanding where they're at, while still accomplishing the things you need to do. And then maybe we have a family member, could be a son or daughter, or a parent or a friend or something like that, that also is that way. Is it tougher to have a relationship with that person? What's a way that you can reel them in? Is it finding something you have in common with these people, and discussing and talking about that? Or is it something I don't know the answer? That's why I'm asking you.
Yeah. And so, I mean, before I answer, I'm going to back up the bus for a quick second. Something I mentioned earlier about the whole, like, we were joking about being canceled, right? And so in today's sensitive culture, people are like, what are you guys saying, Graham? How can you talk about wanting to be canceled and yet unification? Well, I mean, canceled by those that want to be bullies, those that want to be the oppressors, those that want to marginalize other people. Those are the people that I'm very comfortable trying to get canceled by. So let me just clarify that. So anyway, all right, now back to answering your question. So here, let's take a humorous approach at it first. So men and women, are they known for understanding? Are men known for understanding women?
No.
Okay, but yet you coexist.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And so more understand women than you do neurodivergent people. They're just as foreign.
That's a good. That's a wow. Damn, you just cracked the code. I like that. That's a
right?
great analogy right there.
So here's what's the difference between there's a difference then in motivation for you to figure out how to get along then with the female or you know, in your case, or the female species to have a relationship with. And so therefore you change, you alter, but if you don't have that motive, that same level of motivation then with somebody else who's different, why are you going to change, alter, and everything else from your natural inherent state without that motivation? Right? Like, I mean, look, that's real talk. And I think that some of the, and some people may not feel like that's kind or whatever, but look, trying to jam everything down everyone's throat, putting everybody in a bunch of awkward situations that everybody walks away from traumatized ain't kind either. Okay. So let's talk.
Yeah. Well,
so the answer becomes,
I'm going to be as good with neurodivergent people as I am with women. I'm really fucked, you know?
Well, the great news is, again, I'm generalizing here, but the same way that women tend to be much more forgiving than men, neurodivergent tend to be much more forgiving than the neurotypical.
There we go. Okay. So you're saying I got a shot. I love it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, look, and as long as this is why common ground is so important though, right? And that's why I talk about that, because the style of things versus the substance, right, gets confused a lot, right? And believe me, I struggled against that and fought that. Man, I've probably got a few gray hairs from that. And so that's why I was always so like outcome focused and let everybody kind of try to figure out how to do their own thing. And so that's where, and so that was kind of how, at least from a business perspective, that's how I learned how to manage that in relationships, was say, at the end of the day, I'm making a decision based on whether I see this person doing X, Y, Z, right? And so I might as well tell them. And then it's really obvious if they're doing it or not doing it, right?
Yeah.
And how they get it done or whatever else, right? As long as it's morally, ethically, and, you know, and on brand with the company, then they should have then let their individuality come through and their own style and personality and ways of doing it, or organization, all those types of things, right? And I think when you allow that type of individuality, then then you also allow that free thinking to flourish, right? And when you allow that individuality and free thinking to flourish, that's an environment then where the skills, the gifts, the abilities of a neurodivergent person can shine much more freely.
I agree. I totally agree with that assessment. And it's funny because, you know, at least I didn't hear this term, you know, years ago, but when you look back in retrospect and you think about certain people that you encountered in your life, you definitely come, at least I come to that same conclusion, you know, is exactly what you just said, giving them the opportunity to really be free thinkers. And it's amazing what you can get. And you know what, too, everyone's got their good qualities and not so great qualities, you know, whether you're neurodivergent or not. And, you know, you somehow, you know, try to weigh the good and the bad and have it work. It's just, you got to find that good sometimes. That's the piece. You got to give people that opportunity. And that's a great way to think about it, Graham.
Yeah, and the other thing too is funny you say. I was thinking about, you know, Jamie and I have had many conversations about this too, where I'm like, wait a second here. Neurodivergent people get known for their routines and for this, and I can't remember. And I was like, y'all do the same stuff. That you just, there just happens to be more of you, and so your quirks are just considered the norm.
You're exactly right.
And so that's all, and that's where people get frustrated, is because they're like, wait a second here, you're literally telling us that we're second-class citizens because your quirks are what's considered acceptable, but ours aren't.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, it's and so that's. And so that anyway, and so yeah, then get me started then on you know, then on the additional challenges, like I don't know to say, the amount of energy that it takes for, I'm just going to say, the average neurodivergent individual to operate in a typical work office setting versus a typical neurotypical person, you know, is going to be 30 to, you know, anywhere from 20 to 40% more energy will be required for them to figure out how to, you know, just frankly, just how to not get shit from somebody. I'm not even going to talk about how to succeed, right? A lot of times it's just, how do I not get yelled at today? Because I didn't understand something the right way, because it was inherent to everybody else, but it isn't to me.
You always used to say to me, and I still use this line, you always used to say, part of the job is just keeping your ass out of the fire. You used to say that all the time. And you're very correct, you know.
Now, in hindsight, I also recognize that's a very unhealthy, fear-based, fight or flight scenario to live in all the time. And again, I paid for that in these last few years of healing myself, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, good memory. Yeah.